Good evening, everybody. I am Brett L. Pape, and I am with Coach Bruce, and this is the Coach Approach. Coach, I feel like you and I are pretty good friends, right?
We are absolutely, man. Besties, bro.
Yeah. And so this has kind of been a rough week for me, and I appreciate you kind of taking the lead on everything. But it kind of all started. I try when you have a mental illness like I do, you try and always analyze what kind of made you spin in the direction that I'm currently in. And I got to tell you, I keep going back to one thing, and that's hearing the news or watching Breece Hall tear his ACL and he's out for the year. I'll tell you what, Coach, fantasy football sure is fun, but it's so difficult with each week when you got to deal with injuries we got to deal with.
Yeah, it's absolutely brutal, man. I mean, he's RB7 now on the season, right? Tears his ACL. It's an opportunity if you had Michael Carter, who started the season as the RB1. I think a lot of people were surprised by that with the profile that Breece Hall had, his production at Iowa State. I love what Matt Campbell does in the run game at Iowa State. David Montgomery, now Breece Hall. But I hate this for Breece Hall, man. I mean, I've got leagues, and you and I have talked about this, where I took, you tank, right? And so this was the fall for Hall year, whereas usually it's the tank for Tua or whatever you want to call it. This was the fall for Hall. And now I take him 1.01 in those drafts that I was looking at trying to get the 1.01 like everybody's doing for Bijan Robinson this upcoming draft season. And now here I am. Breece Hall is now out, where I had Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker on that team with the 1.01 and 1.02. And now Kenneth Walker's starting to kill it. Breece Hall was starting to kill it. Like, man, I'm looking really good the rest of the season with this team. And now he's out for the year. So, but more so, not from a fantasy perspective, from a real football perspective. You hate to see it. I love the talent. I love the direction the Jets are going. I love the way they're building that roster. And now you have, the one guy that can carry that franchise is now out for the rest of the year. Brutal.
It is brutal. It is brutal, and it's just disheartening. I mean, you root for these guys. You invest so much time. You sit there and you watch NFL Network, and you watch the Combine. You watch a Breece Hall going from a guy who simply was. A lot of people thought he was just a system guy who produced massively, but he wasn't going to translate well to the NFL. I'm not going that might be a little bit far. But there were a lot of people
A
who
little bit.
had Spiller higher than him, who had a number of running backs higher than Breece Hall, and just thought he was a system guy. And then he goes to the combine and absolutely kills it. He gives every analytical guy a big chubby, and he already did that with the film to the film guys. And so he was the perfect match for both. And here we are now, and he's out for the season. So it's been a rough week. You can see right behind me, I have a jersey of him. Huge Breece Hall fan. My son works in the same town as good old Iowa State, so he's a big Breece Hall
Yeah.
guy. And it's been a tough week because the dude was a player. He seems like a great kid, but fortunately, ACL should be able to bounce back. And as far as dynasty value, I saw a tweet today where they said he has more value now
Yep.
after the ACL than he does prior to the season being started. So, welcome to the show. We hate to be the bearer of bad news. You guys already know the news, but that's where I'm at in my head. Still a little heartbroken by it. Love me some Breece Hall, but still love me some fantasy football. And we're ready for a big show, Coach.
Yes, we are, man. Yes, we are. Now, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but obviously they bring James Robinson in. We'll get into that a little bit, what that means. And I think from a Jets perspective, you have Mekhi Becton's already out for the year, and now you have Elijah Vera Tucker is out for the rest of the year. So the offensive line takes a massive hit. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Jets do, moving forward. And I know there's going to be a lot of people asking for, if things start to go a little sideways, asking for Joe Flacco to get another opportunity. But you got to ride it out with Zach Wilson. You got to coach him up, and you got to let's see what happens. But it's an exciting time to be a Jets fan. I understand you're losing Breece Hall, but he'll bounce back. He'll be ready for next year, and I think it's wheels up in New York in the future.
I agree, and I mean, wheels up certainly for Breece Hall. We'll get into the quarterback situation. I would never go back to Joe Flacco. That's just me.
I wouldn't either.
The reality of it is this: they're 5-2. Raise your hand if you thought they would be 5-2 at this point. Okay, I guarantee you, anybody who's watching the show, their hand didn't go up either. So my point being, leave Zach Wilson alone, allow him to develop. But at the same time, if I'm the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets, every week I'm going to add a little bit more to his repertoire. I'm going to say, hey, because if you look at, obviously everyone knows how unhappy Mr. Moore is there, Elijah Moore. And if you look at the A dot of Garrett Wilson since the switch has been made, going back from Flacco to now Zach Wilson, you know that they have made some philosophical changes to that offense. But at the same time, allow them to develop, move on. You're talking about an entire career of a kid, and you're talking about a system which has already invested a lot in the coach. Let's just let the process continue. Don't pull the plug and put frickin' Joe Flacco back in.
100%.
All right, let's move on. Key injuries. We've already talked about Breece Hall. We've talked about Michael Carter and James Robinson. We'll get more into James Robinson later. Before we move on, though, behind me, typically I have a picture. I'm a big mountain guy. Just spent a weekend up in Mammoth, California, a week and a half ago, and I usually always have this big, adventure place picture behind me. But this Breece Hall jersey, I buy jerseys quite frequently, and I don't buy them to wear them. I buy them because these are guys that I like, and I just like, having them. If I could afford buying a bunch of shadow boxes, you'd see them all behind me. But of all the, I have bought a crap load of jerseys over the last few years, and it seems like every one of them has gone down with a significant significant injury. But on Sunday's show, we had someone come in, and everybody, the big thing on Twitter for analysts right now is accountability. And thank you, Fantasy Receipts, for that. But more importantly, I don't think there's anything wrong with being accountable to the calls or the takes that you make. And on Sunday's show, we had a listener or a viewer pop in, and they said, who should we start? And I took the lead, and I picked Romeo Dobbs, or Romeo Dubs, however you say it. And the dude came out and gave a blank. And I'll tell you, me losing virtually almost every game because of the damn weeks last week was tough. But what was tougher was giving advice to another person and seeing it not come to fruition. So if you're out there, if you're the one that I said Romeo Dubs is the best play this week, this Breece Hall jersey is for you. All you got to do is send me your address, DM me. We're on we're on Twitter. I'll go ahead and put up our accounts again.
Yep.
DM any one of these accounts, and we'll send the jersey out to you. All right, moving on. Mike Williams. We're getting right into injuries. We got done with Breece Hall. Mike Williams suffers a high ankle injury. They're on bye this week, but regardless, he's still expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks. Williams has had to step up with Keenan Allen being out. The Los Angeles Chargers are one of the most heavily pass-oriented offenses in the league. This is a big loss for the team, and it's a big loss for a lot of fantasy managers.
No, it's a huge loss. I mean, with Keenan Allen being out, you got a lot of guys, especially in Dynasty, we're looking into this season and ranking Mike Williams above Keenan Allen as Keenan Allen's hitting that age apex for wide receivers. And so there was a lot of love for Mike Williams. He was off to a good start this year, was on pace for some career highs. So now you pivot, right? So now you've got DeAndre Carter, you have Josh Palmer, and you have Gerald Everett. I think there are 3 guys that are going to see increased workload. I think obviously you're going to continue to see Austin Eckler heavily involved. He's on pace for a career high in receptions, which sounds crazy for a guy like Austin Eckler, as much as he's used in the passing game. You are getting Keenan Allen back after the bye week, so that's going to be big for that offense. Interesting stat that I found listening to The Athletic. They've got a stat which is crazy. And I put this on Twitter and said, name the quarterback or the team that is leading the NFL in most passes completed, either at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. And it was Justin Herbert with 14. You're talking about a guy with one of the best arms in the league, and you lose Keenan Allen. You have a guy like Mike Williams who gives you verticality, and they're dinking and dunking their way down the field. And so there's some concerns there. I get Rashawn Slater's out. They've had some issues at the center position. I get what's going on there, but it's a tough loss for Mike Williams. Luckily, it's just a high ankle sprain. He'll miss a few weeks, but he gets the bye week to recover a little bit. But I would pivot to Josh Palmer. I think Sheldon Everett can pick. I think you're going to see Keenan Allen now going to come in as a true wide receiver one, like you probably, we're used to seeing in the past. He's going to be heavily involved as that possession receiver to move the chain. So I hate to get it from Mike Williams, but it's an opportunity for other guys to step up.
Hey, Coach, it's so funny. Over the last few weeks, we talked about the offensive struggles in the NFL, and
Yeah.
you have pointed out, and others have pointed out, a lot of it has to do with that cover two look, that look with the two safeties high. They're taking away everything vertically in the NFL now. Everybody, Austin Eckler, you bring up, there's another reason why they pass so many times behind the line of scrimmage, and that's because Austin Eckler is so damn good catching the ball out of the backfield and making plays out of it. It's an easy completion. Put the ball in your best freaking playmaker's hand and make something happen. But that cover two look is literally changing the game of football, because whatever it's doing, it's making teams go away from what they want to do.
Well, there's a couple things to that too, right? You get a too high look, which everybody understands. If you look at, try to not to get in too much coach speak here, right? We look at 10 to 12 yards from the line of scrimmage, and you have two safeties playing outside of that, sometimes 15 to 20 yards off line of scrimmage. They're taking away that vertical passing game. They're playing above the hard deck, trying to force you to make plays underneath, put together long, sustained drives, and articulate the ball down the field, hoping they can force a turnover and keep you from getting a first down. But you're also seeing what you're seeing with, and you're seeing it with Dallas right now, what they've done with Dan Quinn. Teams are able to get pressure with four guys. There's been a lot of money spent on the front four and the front seven with a lot of these NFL teams in terms of building rosters, guys that can play with speed. They can play in coverage. They can play against the run. So it's just a shift in the NFL. It's like the dead ball era in baseball and then the live ball era in baseball. There's always going to be adjustments that are going to be made. Defense right now, I think, is a little bit ahead of the offense. Offense typically will catch up. But, yeah, it's interesting, man, how the game has changed. But we'll start to see the game get back to, I think, what is all the rules are set up for the passing game to be relevant. I think we'll start to see some of that come back as offenses learn to adjust to it.
I'll tell you, as a former defensive coordinator, though, I was defense coordinator for a year at a local high school at the varsity level, and I kind of like to see it. You talk about the rules favor the offense. It's nice to see, unless you're talking fantasy wise, but it's nice to see these guys having to figure out new ways to put the ball in the end zone.
Yep.
All right, hey, let's move on. Let's move on to this offseason. Austin Hooper left the Cleveland Browns, and the Cleveland Browns decided to give a big contract to David Njoku, despite the fact that he hasn't, he came out of Miami. He was a high draft pick. He hasn't really performed yet. They still believed in him, and he's rewarded them with his play. But unfortunately, he's probably going to be out this week in a game on Monday night versus the Bengals. Suffers a high ankle sprain. With that, we finally get to see maybe Harrison Bryant, with nobody else there, get a real shot at it.
Yeah, and I think that's where you pivot, right? I mean, in a team that likes to use multiple tight end sets, a lot of 12 personnel, Harrison Bryant's going to get an opportunity more in terms of route participation, where Njoku was more of that guy in that offense. Harrison Bryant's a big physical kid. He's an athlete. He can play in space. He doesn't create the separation Njoku does to give you the top end speed that Njoku does, but he's a nice possession guy at the tight end position, a big target in the red zone. But look for David Njoku. Again, it was first believed it might be a high ankle sprain, which typically is a 3 to 4-week deal. It's now being called more of just a sprain. So I think with the playing Cincinnati this week, and then you're going to miss that, but you get the bye week in week 9. So I think he'll be back in week 10. So not as bad as originally indicated. So I think it's wheels up for David Njoku. Hey, look, he's tight end 6. Granted, it's in a year where the tight ends have really dropped off. You don't have Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews. You're probably missing quite a bit. You can just name Kyle Pitts, and that tells you everything you need to know. We'll get to that later.
Yeah, it's crazy. You talk about the tight end position. I've never been one to stream guys, meaning I'll pick up a guy and drop him next week for a better guy. But I've had to do it in one of my home leagues at the tight end spot simply because it's freaking hit and miss on who you have. And David Njoku was a guy that I was happy to be able to pick up a few weeks ago. And it's definitely become a position where streaming is not only possible, it is a necessity. All right, hey, let's move on to another injury. We talked earlier about accountability and my missed call on Romeo Dubs. We had another call where we said, someone asked, should we play Amon-Ra St. Brown or somebody else? And our decision was, our response was, "It's St. Brown. That dude is a legitimate number one receiver in the NFL, and if he's on the field, you play that guy." I'm not going to give us too much grief for that. I'm not giving away a jersey because we got that wrong, because you can't predict injuries. And the reality of it is he went into concussion protocol, and yet he didn't have a concussion. We can talk all you want about how the NFL doesn't seem to care about the player's safety, and that was brought up after what happened to Tua in Miami a few weeks ago. But that injury did change things, because Amon-Ra St. Brown would not have left the game if that injury to Tua did not occur. With that being said, moving on, who do you like to help out if you can't go this week against the Miami Dolphins?
Well, yeah, and I think we talk about the tight end position, and T.J. Hawkinson was a guy coming this year that I wasn't as high on as some others, simply because if your tight end is your third option in the passing game, I wasn't real big on it. They brought in DJ Shark. You have DeAndre Swift. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, but this is an opportunity now for Hawkinson to step in and be a guy they look at as the first or second option in the passing game. Josh Reynolds, I think, is the savvy veteran, had some good years in Tennessee. Now he's in Detroit. I think he's a good play there. Super excited about that opportunity there. And I think if you're a Hawkinson guy, this is the chance for you to say, hey, this is a great opportunity for TJ Hawkinson if Amon-Ra St. Brown was going to be out. But now that he looks like he should be playing, obviously you pivot. And look, it was the right call last week. It was the right process. Amon-Ra St. Brown, if he's playing, you go 8 games in a row with 8 receptions or more, you're going to play every week, especially in an offense that can throw the football. They've struggled against good defenses that can provide pressure. But I like Amon-Ra St. Brown, moving forward. I'd still make the same call we made last week. And, we can't predict injuries, man. But excited to see what the Lions do the rest of the year. They've got Miami Dolphins this week. So it's you're getting to a point now. The Lions are 1-5 with all the hype of that offense. And now you're starting to talk about, Dan Campbell and is this working? Again, pump the brakes, slow it down. There's a lot of really good building blocks. I like what they're doing in Detroit. I love the culture of these building. Give it some time. They've been in a lot of games, and those games easily could have gone the other way. So let's move on.
If I'm a Detroit Lion fan, I haven't been a fan of the NFL team in a long time. We've talked about it before in shows. In 1992, I believe it was 1992, both the Los Angeles Rams and the Los Angeles Raiders moved away. And so as an LA kid, I strictly became a fan of the players I drafted in my fantasy football league. And I kind of didn't worry about teams so much. And I just focused on the game itself and going from there. But I bring that up because if I'm a Detroit Lion fan and I see the type of kids that they have in that program and how they are developing, but I see them at being 1-5, I'm kind of happy, if we want to know the truth, because now I know I'm putting myself in a position, if the wins continue not to come, where I've got a good building block with some of the young guys, the DeAndre Swifts, the cornerback out of Ohio State who was drafted pick number 4 2 years ago. I only say that because I can never pronounce his name. Hutchinson, the defensive line that they took in the first round this year. They've got a great core of young dudes. Yeah. And so with that being said, if this continues and if things stay status quo and they have the number 1 pick, man, that's going to be a fun organization down the road. And even if they weren't struggling like they are right now, they're still not going to compete for an NFL championship this year. I kind of think it's the best of both worlds for them.
No, it is. I mean, the Jets, the Jags, the Giants, you can go on and on about these teams that nobody thought was going to be ready to compete this year, and they're doing just that. And you look at the roster, the youth, what they've done, the coaching with Brian Daboll in New York, with Robert Saleh with the Jets, with Dan Campbell with the Lions. I mean, there's a lot of really good things happening in the NFL. And the best thing about the NFL is the parity. So when you've got teams on any given Sunday that can win a game, whether it's at home or on the road or in London or Mexico, I don't care where you play the game. It's all the same when you get between the lines. So I'm excited about what they're building out there for sure, man.
Hey, first and foremost, before we move on to our next injury, because that's quite depressing, I'll tell you the love that's coming in on this podcast for Coach Bruce today. I'll tell you what, man. I would think that your family is at home tonight and all they're doing is posting comments. Jace Johnson, I'll tell you what, I love this guy as well. But let's move on. Alan Lazard, next guy. Wide receiver one for the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, if Alan Lazard is your wide receiver one, should you really be be surprised that you're struggling? But here we go. He's probably going to be doubtful this week facing the Buffalo Bills. How does that affect good old Green Bay's fantasy options?
Well, here we go again, right? We talked about Romeo Doubs last week, and if Alan Lazard can't go, now you're playing Buffalo Bills. They give up the eighth fewest fantasy points, the wide receiver position. They're dialed defensively, especially on the back end of that defense and what they can do up front with pressure. I'm not touching any wide receivers in Green Bay this week. I'll play Robert Tonyan. I certainly think you ride Aaron Jones as much as you can. I think you've got to figure out how to get A.J. Dillon right. He hasn't looked very efficient. But if I'm Green Bay right now, I'm doing what Green Bay has been known for. I'm slowing the tempo down. I'm letting Aaron Rodgers make the proper check at line of scrimmage. We'll get into him a little bit later. He's not playing up to par right now, but I think you have to figure out a way to grind drives together, and that happens with Aaron Jones. It happens with Robert Tonyan. It happens with A.J. Dillon, and you figure it out, and that's what Green Bay is going to have to do. So if Alan Lazard can't go, I think Romeo Doubs is the guy that I look at and I say, hey, of all the other receivers, you got Randall Cobb is out right now. He's on IR. Christian Watson is not trusted right now. We know what's going on there. I think you have to. Sammy Watkins, another guy that Green Bay says we're going to go and figure out some guy and figure out nobody else can figure out how to make this guy productive, but Green Bay is going to figure it out. That hasn't worked out. So I think you have to play Romeo Doubs again. He's the number one option in terms of wide receivers. If you're going to play one, that's the guy. But again, I don't want to play anybody in the Green Bay wide receiver room this week.
Hey, that might not have even if Alan Lazard is playing this week, they're playing the Buffalo.
I'm not playing him either.
That's my point. They're playing the Buffalo Bills. Yep. That is you talk about two teams going in opposite directions. Let's move on to another injury. We're going to be doing injury talk for a while, everybody. I apologize.
We got to speed through these a little bit. Yeah.
Say that again.
So we got to speed through these a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on. DK Metcalf. Initial reports, he kind of went on the golf cart at the same time as good old Breece Hall. A lot of people were worried that both were going to be coming out with torn ACL injuries, but fortunately for DK Metcalf, that's not the case. He has a patellar tendon issue, and it looks like he may not miss significant time.
No, and it's certainly good news. I mean, there's all the jokes on Twitter about him just making another run of the shitter, but that was not the case. He actually was able to hold the shit together, so to speak, this week from that perspective. But if you're going to – and Marquise Goodwin filled in last week, had a couple of touchdowns. We know he's got top-end speed. Tyler Lockett is always a guy vertically that can challenge defenses, can create intermediate catches. He's a guy that's backside digs, posts, corner routes, comeback routes. We know who he is. He's productive. I think the sleeper guy here would be D. Eskridge, right? If Geno Smith, who's playing as well as he is, there's another guy that's got some speed. So they've got some guys that can get you some yards. But the play that I really like this week in this offense, I think they're going to use more 12 personnel this week. They've always historically been a team likes to use multiple tight end sets. But I like Noah Fant this week. I think Noah Fant's a guy that can produce this week. I know what they're doing with Will Dissly. You've got Colby Parkinson. It's a three-headed monster. They're a tight end. But I think this is a week that Noah Fant finds his way. I'm going to call it. I'm going to call Noah Fant touchdown this week.
I like the call. As a longtime Noah Fant truther, I'm beginning to get a little more worried about him because he hasn't been what everyone thought he was going to be. And I only bring that up because last week in the Chargers game, he had an opportunity to make about a 35-yard touchdown. It was kind of a slant in the middle of the field, deep post route. Yeah, he dropped it. It would have been a touchdown. And golly, man, if you appropriate or not, this was a saying that I grew up with from my high school coaches, and that is, looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. I'd sure like to see Noah Fant have that big game that you're talking about.
Yeah, the athletic profile is there, and it's funny when the trade was made for Russell Wilson, right? Everybody thought, oh, this is great for Noah Fant. He's going to get a quarterback that likes the tight end position. No. You're part of the trade. You're going to Seattle, but now you look at it. Who's the better quarterback right now? I'll take Geno Smith. Easy call. Yeah, and he still can't be relevant. That's why it's a deep dive. I'm going to call it. I'm taking my shot. Noah Fant finds the end zone this week.
There you go. All right, moving on. We're going to make these last couple injuries pretty quick. First one, Ryan Tannehill may be out with a right foot ankle injury. Could see Malik Willis making a start, which would be his first. If that happens for me, if I have Malik Wilson and SFs, because that's the only place I would have him. I'm not going to have him in one quarterback leagues. But if I have him, his rushing possibilities might make it worthwhile putting him in there. But more importantly, just being a fan of football, let's see what his athletic ability can do in a real life NFL game on a Sunday. Next injury we got to talk about is Chuba Hubbard, sprained ankle, and
suffer a sprained ankle. You're going in and out there, Brett, but I'm sure you'll figure it out. But Chuba Hubbard did not practice today. Deontay Foreman, of course, filled in last week, 6'1", 240. Guy can run between the tackles. He can bounce it outside when he needs to. 15 carries, 115 yards to go along with 2 catches for 27. And I think if you're going deeper, like who's the RB2 now with Chuba Hubbard out and the CMC trade is I like Raheem Blackshear, undrafted free agent out of Virginia Tech. Never had 1,000 yards rushing in his career at Virginia Tech, with 757 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground. You go with 25 catches for 250 in his senior year. You can catch the ball out of the backfield. That's not a Deontay Foreman strength. You could see Raheem Blackshear play on passing downs and maybe get a little bit of carries. If somehow they're in the lead against Atlanta, you could see Raheem Blackshear getting some late work there too. So that's a deep dive. We'll see what happens there. The next one we'll move on to is Brett figures out his technical difficulties over there in the middle of nowhere, California, is Zeke Elliott. RB18 coming into the week, suffers a knee sprain, and depending on what site you're listening to or what injury report you want to follow, he is either a knee sprain, a slight knee sprain, all the way up to a torn MCL. If you're talking to or listening to Cowboys Wire or Cowboys Talk, he is probably going to suit up this week. It looks like he's going to try to give it a go. He's averaged 4 yards a carry. He's been productive, 4 touchdowns on the ground to go with 6 grabs. They're not using the running backs, whether it's Zeke or Pollard, as much in the passing game, but the Cowboys are using the tight end position with Dalton Schultz, Jacob Ferguson. They're not throwing the ball nearly as much, obviously, with Dak out. But I do think Ezekiel Elliott will suit up. If I'm the Cowboys, I'll probably give him a start in the first series because it's Zeke Elliott. He's earned that right if he's healthy enough to go. And then you kind of pivot to Tony Pollard and give him the touches, use Zeke in short yardage and goal line situations if needed. But Tony Pollard, he's only started one game with Zeke out, and it was 2 years ago against San Francisco, where he had 2 touchdowns, and he was 60 yards receiving and another 50 yards on the ground. I think he was like an RB6 that week. So Tony Pollard can certainly fill in for Zeke if Zeke is, in fact, out.
Hey, I'm back, Coach.
There he is.
Yeah, and now it says I'm Coach Bruce, so I feel a little bit better because as the love continues to come in from our viewers, it'll be directed my way, not your way. All right, the Ezekiel Elliott. I'll tell you what, Tony Pollard is fun. A lot of people like Jacob Sanderson have always wondered what he would do if given this opportunity. And we're going to at least, even if Zeke plays this week, I got to believe we're still going to be looking at a much bigger role for Tony.
Well, I think the big thing there, too, people have to understand is you've got the NFC East is the best division of football. That division is 20-7 combined. Washington's the worst team at 3-4. You've got the Giants at 5-2. You've got the Eagles at 7-0. And you've got the Cowboys at 5-2. They can't afford to continue. They can't afford to lose another game here to stay in that race. So I think you're going to see the Cowboys throw everything at them. They just brought in Hankins, the D tackle, in a trade. To play that one technique, I think that's going to be a good addition to the D line. That's where they're vulnerable, is between the tackles against the run game. So I like what they're doing there. And of course, defensively, they're a monster. I mean, another game giving up just 6 points. So.
Yeah, it's got to be nice to be a Dallas Cowboy fan right now.
It is. It is nice, man. But it's still the Eagles' division, as much as I hate to say it.
Correct, but still, they're much better off than what you thought they were going to be 5 weeks ago.
When Dak went down, I thought the season was over, for sure.
All right, moving on. Last injury we're going to hit of note, and that is the return of Russell Wilson. You saw if you were on Twitter today, all you heard about is you saw different memes of him doing weird things down the aisle of a airplane while everyone's sleeping. But apparently he spent the entire flight to London doing some sort of rehab to get himself ready, and he will be playing this week. So Russell Wilson's back Let's ride. What do you think this means for the Denver Broncos?
Well, you see a couple different things, right? You see Nathaniel Hackett now rumored to be on the hot seat. They got to get a win this week against Jacksonville and London, or he could be done. I think what's interesting for Russell Wilson is Brett Ripien gets his first start. Shout out to Boise State, big Boise State fan, but he gets an opportunity to start, throws the ball 46 times, and there's Russ like, hey, you're going to let Brett Ripien cook, but can we let Russ cook? Well, I don't want to get into. I won't get into it. We've talked about Nathaniel Hackett's offense versus Russell Wilson's strength. They don't really align, but this has got to be a game where Nathaniel Hackett says, "Hey, I don't have Javonte Williams. Why am I forgetting? Latavius Murray and Melvin Gordon have not looked great. It's 3 to 4 yards on a cloud of dust. I think you've got to figure out ways to get KJ Hamler in space. You got to get Cortland Sutton more involved. You got to get Jerry Jeudy more involved with the screen game. Find manufacture touches for your best players. Get the ball in your best players' hands. Let Russ cook, and let's figure it out. Because, look, the run game is not going to get it done this week against Jacksonville. You're going to have to be able to throw the football. So I would not be surprised to see Russell Wilson throw the ball 35 to 40 times this week.
Well, let's see what he does with that opportunity, because so far, with whatever opportunity he's gotten,
it hasn't been good.
It hasn't looked good. All right, so that's it. It only took us 31 minutes for us to get through the injury report of the NFL. That's where we're at in football these days. It is crazy. Before we move on to the NFL news, though, friendly reminder, we come live every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. And typically we go all the way to 9:40. We're answering your start-sit questions. We're also, if we don't get questions, we go through every game. We give you our picks against the spread. We may not do that this week, but we will certainly focus on every fantasy relevant player and how they match up against the opponent they face. We're probably going to move that up to 8:30 because we've been going a little bit longer and we want to finish the show in an ample amount of time for Coach Bruce and I to set our own lineup. So expect us on this weekend at 8:30. We will post all our links on our Twitter pages. So if you're not following Coach Bruce, if you're not following the coach approach, please do so. There they are right there. I look for, I love that show. That show, we get live freaking news right off the bat. We talk about the inactives, and we get the day getting going right with a great show. Don't you think, Coach?
Yeah, man, it's an exciting show. I think it's as much as I love this show, and it's nice to get all the injury news and get people up to date. You've just finished up your waiver wire probably by this point. I know some leagues don't do it until Thursday morning. We can certainly answer questions there. We try to cover that information on this show, waiver wire ads, NFL news, injury reports, to kind of let people know what to expect in this coming weekend and do a little bit more of a deep dive from a coaching aspect of why we think these players are great for your lineup this week. But yeah, the Sunday show is a can't miss. We'll start at 8:30 moving forward, just to give everybody enough time to set their lineups and ask all the questions they need to ask for starts and sits. So love to have you guys on 8:30 Pacific Standard Time on Sunday morning.
Perfect. Now the Sunday show, it's only on YouTube, but we put the link out. The Wednesday show we not only have on YouTube, it's also on Spotify, Apple, and Anchor. And we also link those to our Twitter page for the Fantasy Football Coach Approach page. Send it out all the time. All right, let's get into the NFL news. With all these injuries to the top running backs, let's talk about them real quick before we get into it. But you got guys like Javonte Williams, Breece Hall, Cam Akers being AWOL, but it may not just be because the injury once again. There's a heck of a lot of running backs that have suffered terrible injuries this year. But with that being said, a big guy on everybody's radar last year was Travis Etienne. He slowly is taking over the job from James Robinson, and now he's the clear running back. So much so they had no problem shipping off James Robinson off to the Jets earlier this week. With that being said, Travis Etienne, man, he's a hot commodity right now, Coach.
Hey, Travis Etienne is I loved him when he was at Clemson. I love the way he was utilized there. I was really high on him going into last season before the injury. Etienne, with James Robinson now, the picture becomes a clear RB1. He's RB20 on the season. When you consider the lack of production or lack of usage, I should say, he had through the first couple weeks of the season, that's pretty impressive. He's got 68 carries for 400 yards on the score. He's also got 14 grabs for 150 yards. He's averaging 81 yards per game. 14 carries for 114 last week against the Giants, which is, if you look what they've done defensively this year, they've been in every game, 5-2. We talked about it. The Giants are legit. So I'm excited. But the two guys that you want to look at in terms of RB2 and RB3 in that offense is going to be JaMycal Hasty, undrafted free agent, 5'8", 200 pounds out of Baylor. He's a 4.55 guy. Doesn't give you a lot of speed burst, but he's good. He doesn't give you a lot of top end speed, but he's good in short space. If you want to call it shaking in a phone booth, right? A coaching term that we like to use. But he spent his first 2 years in San Francisco, finished 2021 as the pass catching back, 23 grabs for 157 yards. Snoop Connor's another guy. If you want to take a deeper dive, I spent some fab. I think $1 or $2 in a couple leagues. I got him for nothing. I put $0 out. Was able to get him. So I think everybody was pivoting to JaMycal Hasty. So I was able to pick up Snoop Connor for at a discount. 5'10", 200, 4.6 speed. Again, not a speed guy, but he can catch the ball in the backfield. 32 receptions for 225 over his 3 seasons at Ole Miss. So you've now Etienne, Hasty, and Connor that can be viable in the passing game to spell Etienne when needed. So those are 2 guys that I would look at as the RB2 and RB3 in that offense.
Yeah, I like Snoop. And I'll tell you what, if you look at just trying to replace James Conner, I think Snoop Connor's more of that guy than JaMycal Hasty. But JaMycal Hasty today was mentioned by Doug Peterson as someone we got to get more touches to. So either one of them, again, at this point in the year, and when you're talking about backup running backs, they're all dart throws. So with that being said, pick either one of them up if they're not on someone's team already. This one kind of segues right into our next topic, and that is the trade of James Robinson, I should say, to the Jets. Robinson is dealing with a little bit of a knee issue. You saw last week when the trade was made for CMC to San Francisco. In a short week, he only got 10 opportunities to touch the ball. I kind of think that's what we're going to look for James Robinson. How do you think he's going to be used for the Jet offense? And does that change is he the RB1 or is Michael Carter the RB1?
I think it's Michael Carter. I mean, he knows the system. He's been in the system. He was adequate last year as a rookie. He got to start early in the season this year. They want to kind of ease Breece Hall into the offense there. I think Michael Carter is your guy that will get the first opportunity to be the guy. James Robinson, I compared to CMC last week, where you have a few days to get the offense and understand what's going on. You'll have a base package for him. I expect to see again, like I predicted with CMC last week, somewhere around 8 to 10 touches probably in the run game. He does have receiving ability, but that's Michael Carter's role. So I don't see a ton of usage there on third downs. I think Michael Carter will be that guy. But James Robinson, look, 89 grabs for 600 yards through 3 seasons, but we'll defer to Michael Carter in the passing game. I love James Robinson. I love the story. I love what he did in his rookie season. I think that this is just a situation. I think Michael Carter's earned the trust of Robert Saleh. He's earned the trust. But, hey, we got to point out, you lost Mekhi Becton again for the year. You just lost Elijah Vera Tucker for the year. The offensive line is beat up. They're going to have to find ways to figure out how they're going to move the football. And that's where all of a sudden Elijah Moore's asking for a trade, right? Now all of a sudden he's back. He's in the good graces. He's going to play this week. They're going to find ways to get him touches. So it's going to be interesting to see how that's used, not necessarily this week, but I think moving forward the rest of the season. It's certainly a possibility that James Robinson could take over the RB1. I don't think anybody would be surprised if he did, but I think for this week, Michael Carter's your RB1 this week in New York.
I agree with that. And you just got talking about the familiarity. I mean, he's been in the system. The coaches know him. But I love James. I think James Robinson is just, you talk about, he's got a great floor, not a great ceiling. So do with what you want. But going back to the Jets in particular, at 5-2, people are talking, like especially Elijah Moore, that they're not happy with what's going on with the passing attack. Young quarterback and Zach Wilson. How does this change though? I feel like there's a fine line from making a young guy throw the ball a shitload of times and not letting him throw at all. You got to give him some opportunities to see what he does with the ball, throwing the ball down the field.
No, and you manufacture plays, right? I think if there's offensive coordinators that you look at and figure out how they get their best players. Look at Sean McVay and how he uses Cooper Kupp. You look at Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, how he uses Justin Jefferson, who came from Sean McVay. You look at San Francisco and how they use Deebo Samuel and Ayuk and Kittle. You've got to have an offensive coordinator and offense that understands who are my best players going into each game based on matchups that I want to manufacture touches for. And there are coordinators that struggle with that. Arthur Smith, we'll talk about a little bit later, can't figure out how to get Pitts and Drake London involved now. But that's where I think the Jets have got to figure it out. How do I get Michael Carter some good touches? How do I get Garrett Wilson touches? How do we get Elijah Moore touches who can create yards after the catch? So again, it's going to be interesting seeing how the Jets use that and how they manufacture touches there.
Before we go on,
I know where you're going with this. You're in and out again. So Blake Nelson, should I trade Brandon Ayuk in a 2023 second-round pick for Amari Cooper in a 12-man dynasty league? So hey, it's a good trade, right? So it's a fair trade. And I think if you look at that, a lot of this depends on roster construction. I'm assuming PPR format. I like Brandon Ayuk. However, I think what they're going to be doing with CMC and what they're going to be using, Kittle's been more involved in the passing game over the last couple of weeks. He is technically, to me, he's the fourth option in the passing game. You've got Kittle, you got CMC, and you got Deebo. Ayuk becomes that fourth option in that passing game. You can argue three, depending on run game script and how Kittle is used in line. But you're giving up a 2023 second-round pick. That also depends, is that an early second? Is it a late second? Is it a mid-second based on the opponent's record? What you're giving up, because you would be trading him away. So what is that 2022? And then Amari Cooper, who has had some very good weeks, and you get Deshaun Watson coming back after the bye week to face the Texans. Funny how the NFL makes that work. But I would, based on playoffs, I think Amari Cooper is going to be a great guy to have as you get later in the season. The Cleveland Browns are struggling this year. The O-line's not been what we thought it would be. I think Amari Cooper is definitely a viable, especially with Njoku being out right now. That's only for a couple of weeks. Long term, though, man, I still like Ayuk, and I still like to keep my 2023 second because of this draft. But if you are a contending team, you're getting down toward playoff time, I could certainly see an Amari Cooper look there. But I would keep Ayuk in a 2023 second in this one. But it's a fair trade. What are your thoughts?
I'll tell you what,
Brett?
my thoughts are this. I think
You're actually Coach Bruce right now, so you flip the screen, but
that's okay. And finally, Coach Bruce will look like the idiot in the group. So with that being said, it goes down to two things. I'm making the deal if I'm competing. I'm trading that away for Cooper if I got a competing team. If I don't have a competing team, there's no need. I got a younger receiver in Ayuk, and I got a second-round pick with it. So if you're competing, I get it. If not, keep Ayuk in the 23 second.
There you go, Blake. Go get him.
All right, moving on. And this is a move. This was a big move brought to the attention of everyone on Monday. Sam Ehlinger replaces Matt Ryan as the quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. Matt Ryan did suffer a grade 2 shoulder sprain, but was going to be pulled regardless as the starter, according to Frank Wright. My first thoughts on this is how many times we look at Atlanta, and I have said from the start, you're not winning. It doesn't look like you're going to win anytime in the future. Put in their quarterback they just drafted out of Cincinnati, Desmond Ridder. Put him in now. What are we waiting for? We know what we got with frickin' the quarterback they got there in there now. Put in Ridder and see what happens. Here's an organization that is doing just that by putting Sam Ehlinger, a 6th-round pick in 2021 out of the University of Texas. They're putting him in now. We're going to see what we have with him.
Yeah, I think this is, Ryan has a grade 2 shoulder sprain, but the reality is if you're looking about what the offense has been doing and where that team is at, I agree with you 100%. I think they were going to make this move regardless of whether Matt Ryan was healthy or not. Sam Ehlinger, I loved watching Texas games when he was playing. It reminds me of watching Johnny Manziel when he was at Texas A&M and other quarterbacks that could beat you with their arm, but they could also beat you in the run game. Over 11,000, almost 11,500 yards passing in his 4 seasons at Texas with 94 touchdown passes, another 1,900 yards on the ground and 33 scores. He's the closest thing to Taysom Hill at the quarterback position that the NFL can offer right now. I mean, in terms of how he runs with physicality, he's not Taysom Hill. Don't get it twisted. I'm just talking about there's some similarities in their running style. He can bulldoze a linebacker if needed, but I like it. I like the move. He didn't throw a pass last season. He came in 3
He's
carries.
never thrown a pass in the NFL at all.
Yeah, no, not at all. But he gives you the rushing upside. He faces the Commanders this week. They give up 19 points a game with quarterbacks and 217 yards through the air. Sam Ellinger's a guy, I promise you, that will have some run design calls for Sam Ellinger. You won't see it often, but you will see it on occasion. Third down situations. Now you have a very, very good running back in Jonathan Taylor. Now all of a sudden play action becomes a little more relevant. You can use Alec Pierce. You can use their plethora of tight ends. Talk about 3 tight ends in Seattle. They've got 3 of them in Indianapolis as well. But I like what they're doing. I want to see what Sam Ellinger does, and why not? You're 3-3-1. Why not find out what you have in Sam Ellinger? You know Matt Ryan's not getting you where you want to go. So let's figure out what we have with Sam going into the next season. And I like the move. And I think the surprising part is they basically came out and said, "Hey, we're using him for the rest of the season." That was a little surprising.
You find out. You do 2 things. You do 2 things, Coach, by doing that move. One, you find out if it's worth even keeping Sam Ellinger because he's going to get an opportunity to play. And then 2, if he's not good, you continue to build draft capital because is this team, as they are currently constructed, do you see the Indianapolis Colts winning the Super Bowl this year?
No, not at all.
No.
The offensive line is not performing. Yeah, no.
So a few losses down the road and being able to have possibly the opportunity to pick up a guy like the Ohio State quarterback or like the Alabama quarterback or any of them.
CJ Stroud, Bryce Young. Yeah.
Yes, make it happen. All right, moving on. Christian McCaffrey.
Hey, real quick. Blake Nelson updated. So now that we understand his roster, he's got Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, and Alvin Kamara at running back. He's light at receiver, and it's going to be a mid-second. Based on that information, you're absolutely making the trade, and you're bringing in Amari Cooper because you're light at receiver. You've already got some running backs. So in that situation, you are a contending team. I love that backfield. So I think you're making a run. This is a dynasty league because you got a 2023 second, JT and Saquon, younger running backs with big upside. Obviously an RB1 last year for JT. Barkley's right there this year. Kamara, aging. You got to make that decision later in the year if there's a chance for you to flip him if you're not going to make the playoffs. But right now you're going to stand pat, and I like the addition of Amari Cooper based on that roster.
I agree, but anytime I see Kamara, man, I don't know what happened over the last few years, but man, I'm all about the future. And Kamara, God, if he can get one big game, I'm unloaded him as soon as he has that big game.
Yeah, you and I are both. We were in that dynasty mindset, right? As soon as Kamara has a big game, he's at that age apex for running backs. You're looking to sell high anytime you can. So,
hey, there's a lot of breaking news today, though. I saw a lot of reports today that not only did Philadelphia grab one of the top pass rushers, they're making a strong push right now for Alvin Kamara.
God, I hate that. God, the Eagles just keep reloading. They just, it's if there's a roster that I love from top to bottom, there's Buffalo and there's Philadelphia, the 2 teams that right now I would tell you are going to be representing the AFC and the NFC in the Super Bowl. I love what Philadelphia is doing as a Cowboys fan. Man, I hate it, but God, I love it. I love it. I love what they're doing.
All right, let's move on in our news, more of our news. And we're going to talk about Christian McCaffrey makes his 49ers debut. We already talked about accountability and how this jersey is available to the young man, young woman, whoever it was, who asked us if they should play Romeo Dobbs last week, and I said they should. Well, when you talk about accountability, one of the things I asked you last week was on Sunday morning show, how many touches do you think Christian McCaffrey would get? You told me between 10 and 12. Well, if you look at his stat line, he had 8 carries for 38 yards and 2 receptions for another 24. Exactly like you predicted. Now he's got an extra week going into a game in the offense. He's becoming more familiar with it. But what does that mean to a guy like Jeff Wilson? Jeff Wilson has been nothing but productive when he's had the opportunities. Now, he has struggled throughout his career with injuries, but when healthy, he has games like he had this last week. And the game he had last week was 7 carries for 54 yards. And then you add in the fact that Elijah Mitchell is about to come off IR. So with that being said, what is CMC's new spot mean for a Jeff Wilson or an Elijah Mitchell?
God, it's a great question. I love the trade with CMC from a strictly a football perspective and what San Francisco needs to do to take that next step in a tough division. But I don't love it as much for fantasy when you've got the amount of guys like IU. We went through this, right? All the weapons they have, they're guys that can catch the ball and get yards after the catch. You just added another one of those guys in CMC. So it's going to affect Jeff Wilson. When Elijah Mitchell comes back, Jeff Wilson goes from the RB1 for a couple of weeks to all of a sudden the RB3 on that team, because I think Elijah Mitchell's talent in that zone run scheme Shanahan loves is a great addition and a complement to Christian McCaffrey. So that's the order I see it. CMC 1, Elijah Mitchell 2, and then Jeff Wilson becomes the RB3. I would not be surprised if you get later in the year and you've got to, first of all, if you're going to get in the playoffs, I want to limit Christian McCaffrey's touches anyway. From a standpoint of, if we're going to make a run in the playoffs, I need CMC healthy. So I'm not trying to give him 25, 30 touches a game. I'm trying to keep him as healthy as I can. So I like what San Francisco has the ability to do with those three guys that can all be very productive in that zone run scheme. So I think it's a great situation for San Francisco to be in, and it opens up things in the passing game for Jimmy Garoppolo, right? So love it.
All right, let's move on. Am I back? Because I know you lost me there for about 20 seconds.
That's all right. We're at the
right, great. The good thing about it is I can always count on you to be long-winded. All right, quarterback controversy in New England. They used a hell of a lot of draft capital last year to take Mac Jones with a 15 overall pick. He suffers a high ankle injury earlier in the year. Good old Bailey Zappi, a rookie out of Western Kentucky, picked in the 4th round, comes in and he performs well. Now you got Mac Jones healthy. He comes in against a team. I mean, if you asked anybody if the New England Patriots or the Chicago Bears were going to win Monday night's game, 98% of people probably would have picked the New England Patriots. However, Mac Jones came in and struggled, and after his 3rd possession of the game, he threw an interception, and he was relieved by Bailey Zappi, who quickly came in and led them on 2 touchdown drives. But unfortunately, that's about all he did on the night. Where do you see this kind of playing out? What's going on in New England? Is there really a quarterback controversy there?
Well, I think there is. I mean, I think you look at New England, what they're doing. Bill Belichick does not like to lose. They're 1-3 in the 4 starts that Mac Jones has had. And unfortunately, he gets the credit for the loss because he started the game this past week. He's only averaging 11 points per game. He's a QB 35 right now. They're 3-4 in last place in the AFC East. So if you're trying to make a run, you have a decision to make as a head coach. Do I go with a hot hand and the guy that the players seem to be rallying around, which is Bailey Zappi? If you look at Jacoby Myers, the big knock on him is touchdown upside. Well, and his 2 touchdowns this year came from Bailey Zappi. They did not come from Mac Jones. So, and Bailey Zappi in his 2 starts was a top 10 quarterback, and I think 20. And for the 2 starts, he's QB 16 overall. I'm playing a hot hand. In those 2 starts, he's completing 71% of his pass. In his 2 starts with New England, he's completed 41 of 55, so 74.5%, 497 yards, 3 touchdown passes to just 1 interception. I'm playing Bailey Zappi. I understand you have 15th overall pick for Mac Jones. I understand the ankle injury. You gave him an opportunity to play. He didn't do well in that opportunity. Neither one of these guys have got rockets for arms, right? It's got to throw in timing. You got to throw in rhythm. I'm going Bailey Zappi, but I know the what you spent in draft capital, you're probably going to go Mac Jones, but I don't care. I think that's where coaches get themselves in trouble. I understand you're paying a player a certain amount of money. He needs to play. Look, it's about that locker room. It's about the franchise. It's about my job as a head coach. I want to stay and be the head coach of this team for as long as I can. And I'm going to play the team. I owe it to everybody in that locker room to play the guy that gives me the best chance to win. And to me, that's Bailey Zappi.
Okay, I keep going back to, I feel like there's always got to be a reality check with NFL coaches, or even with fantasy football managers. And that kind of, it's a segue. Hey, Gitz, let me put that back up there.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. First, before
He's
we
giving
take
his team
up,
now.
Yeah, okay, Fair enough. What I would like to know, are we talking redraft or are we talking dynasty? Because if we're talking whatever we're talking, it changes everything. So please let us know that. But with that being said, it leads into it. Here's a guy who's 2-5. If he's in Dynasty, he's going to take a way different approach than if he's in redraft. And it's very similar to the New England Patriots right now. What are we doing here? Are they a team with Bailey Zappi that you can see compete for the NFL championship? I know your answer, so I'm not going to wait for it. No, you don't think they can. So with that being said, at the record they currently have, put Mac back down. Don't worry about this season as far as it relates to the, record, and just let the kid continue to develop. I mean, I don't get it. I don't get why we pull the plug so quickly in the NFL these days.
So here's my counter argument to that, and then we'll move on because I don't want to spend too much time on this. But I think the counter argument there is he's played a full season, right?
And he did well. I remember that?
He did do well, but he's regressed.
Right. He didn't regress.
He's not playing as well as he did last year.
Well, fair enough. But he also hasn't played the last 3.5 weeks. And he also doesn't – I mean, are they really – is their roster that great? Who is he throwing to?
Same guys he was throwing to last year. You brought in Devontae Parker, right? That's an upgrade over N'Keal Harry.
We can agree to disagree. My point is
there you go.
I would much rather see what I have with the first-round pick than see with the fourth-round pick for 2 reasons. One, you invest way much more in the first-round pick. And 2, the fourth-round pick psyche is not going to be affected more than the first-round psyche. If you're being beat out by a first-round pick, you weren't even expected to play this year. Bailey Zappi is going to be fine with whatever decision you're going to be making. Mac Jones, he already said on the sidelines, if you watch the videos, he basically said, I'm out. Whatever that meant, it certainly wasn't good. My point is, you can't give up on Mac Jones already. And the reality of it is, they're both the same fucking guy. It's not like we have Mac Jones and Malik Willis. We have Mac Jones and we have Bailey Zappi, who looks just like, not only physically, but athletically and ability-wise, they're no different. So I'm going to say leave it alone, put Mac Jones back in, and let's move on. But we agree to disagree.
We agree to disagree. There you go.
We do. And I'll tell you what, I think this is the first time we've actually really disagreed on something.
That's okay.
All right. We're moving on. Green Bay Packers lose their 3rd straight game of the season. First question. Can the Packers make the playoffs? Your thoughts on that, Coach?
No. I think the defense is underperformed. I think coming into the season with Jair Alexander and the piece they have on defense, we saw Gary. We thought that defense would be better. Gary is now hurt. I don't like what's going on defensively. I don't like what's going on offensively. I think Aaron Rodgers coming out in the public on the Pat McAfee show and calling out his players for not the 2nd or 3rd time. It seems like the 4th or 5th time. That locker room feels like it's divided. He's a QB 18 right now. When you're the QB 18, you're not the reason you're staying in games. You're part of the reason you're not winning games. And the Packers, first of all, no, I don't think they can make the playoffs. They have Buffalo this week on the road in Buffalo. I don't see him coming out of that game with a win. You're trying to bring in an A.J. Green. It does nothing to help your receiving core. He hasn't helped out in Arizona. He's certainly not going to help out in Green Bay. So to me, it goes back to Project 32, my write-up on the Packers. The best way for the Packers to be competitive is to ride Aaron Jones, use A.J. Dillon in short yardage goal line situations, get that running game going, and let Aaron Rodgers make plays when he needs to, and use Aaron Rodgers. And he's not going to want to do it, but in my opinion, he's more of a game manager at this point than he is a guy you want to put the team on his back and let him go out and get a win for you. He does not have Devontae Adams. He signed off on the deal. That was a mistake. The comments that he made, Devontae Adams not knowing if he's coming or going, all the stuff he's doing on the side is the circus stuff on the side during the season. I get why Devontae Adams wanted out. Give me a quarterback that's going to be the first one in, the last one to leave, and I feel like is 100% fully committed to this team. And I think he's getting that with Derek Carr. I don't think Green Bay's getting that with Aaron Rodgers. So I'm not happy with what's going on there.
Well, whether he's getting that, whether Aaron Rodgers is the first guy or last guy, whatever, the reality is the situation is currently stands. They're better football team if they run the football. And that's because he
Yes.
made the decision to be okay with Devontae Adams being traded. The Green Bay Packers made the decision that they were better off because, for financial reasons, to go in a different direction. So here we are now, and you got a Christian Watson, a second-round pick out of North Dakota State, who has not lived up to the hype or not lived up to what at least the Green Bay Packers thought he would be. You're relying on a guy named Romeo Doubs, who was a fifth-round pick. So my point is, you did this. You guys did it. Aaron Rodgers agreed to it. So ride it out by freaking utilizing the running game. Do it and just know that's who you are at this current state. I'm not willing to say that Aaron Rodgers is no longer capable of throwing the ball down the field 30 to 40 times a game. I'm just saying the roster does not give him the opportunity to do that.
Agreed, 100%.
All right, let's move on. With that being said, we go from the poorhouse to the rich house. The New York Giants, son of a gun, Daniel Jones, everybody's whipping boy, if you're a New York Giants fan the last 3.5 years. And he's doing a hell of a job doing one thing. That's leading his team to a win. You got to love to see it, Coach.
Oh, I do love it. I love what they're doing with Danny Dimes. Last week he goes for 200 yards passing. He's another 107 yards on the ground. He was a QB3 last week. He's climbing up the board. It seems like every single week. Barkley's putting up another 100-yard rushing performance. He's active in the passing game. I love what they're doing. They've got some youth there on the offensive line. I love what Brian Daboll has done. I would love to go back, and I meant to do this before the show, and look at what Brian Daboll and Josh Allen did in their first year together versus what Daniel Jones and Brian Daboll are doing in New York. That's not comparing Danny Dimes to Josh Allen as the complete player. They're not even close. But Danny Dimes, he's making a very, very strong case for him to be the QB1 going into 2023 in New York, as opposed to them not signing him to his fifth-year option. Let's see what we have this year. Now, I think he's played himself into an opportunity. Now, we have a lot of season left to go. Let's see how the rest of it goes. But I like what they're doing. And look, he's doing it, and they're moving the ball, and they're winning games with an offense that has a hodgepodge of wide receivers, right? You finally get Wan'Dale Robinson back, which I think is great. Kadarius Stoney still can't play. Kenny Galladay, forgot how to play football 2 years ago. Daniel Bellinger is now out for a long time with the orbital fracture. So, again, more challenges this week. Let's see how Danny Dimes responds this week. But you got to love what the Giants are doing.
You got to love what they're doing. I'll tell you what, you bring up those receiving stats. You called them hodgepodge. I don't know how you don't think that's the worst receiving group in the whole entire league. I mean, they've got $19 million in salary cap and a guy that has given them absolutely nothing since he's come over from the Detroit Lions. And yet, here we are, they're 6-1. Jets moved to 5-2. We've already talked about Breece Hall. We've talked about how we think Zach Wilson, he's just a game manager right now. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it because I feel like that's what's allowing them to win games. And the key now for the New York Jets is can they make up for the loss of Breece Hall with the guys that are coming back? Gitz, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Redraft changes some things. We will take a look at the roster and we'll go from there after that. Please, if you want, DM one of us. We'll put that DMs, all our Twitter accounts on there again. So you can DM one of us, send those messages, and both of us, if not at least one of us, will reach back to you. All right, moving on. Dak Prescott. He came back, struggled a little bit. The offense wasn't exactly clicking early on. But with that defense, as long as they're not hurting you, it's okay if they're not able to score every drive like they weren't early on in the game.
Yeah, Dallas is what they're doing defensively in year 2 with Dan Quinn has been absolutely awesome. Slow start in Big D. It was 6-3 at the half against the worst defense in the NFL and Detroit Lions. They struggled to move the ball, but Dak came back 19-25 for 207 yards, completed 76% of his passes, threw a touchdown. Pollard and Zeke are getting it done in the run game. We talked about Zeke earlier, whether he's going to play this week or not with the knee sprain or the knee issue. But I like what Dallas is doing. They're basically saying, hey, we have so much confidence in our defense. We don't have to score 30 or 40. We don't have to throw the ball 40, 45 times a game. My biggest thing about Cooper Rush And then when Dak came back was run the same offense you ran with Cooper Rush, with Dak Prescott, a little bit more, a couple more shots, opportunities, right? A little bit more play action. Continue to run that naked bootleg. It's been so successful for them. I like what Dallas is doing. And now you just brought in, a D tackle that you got in a trade today that's going to help shore up what you do against the run. I like what they're doing in Big D for sure. Dak Prescott, I think, is back. We're going to see some big performances throughout the rest of the season. They'll start to open up that offense a little bit, but stick with what's gotten you here, right? You're 5-2. You hung in with Philadelphia. You tried to make a run late in that game. They were able to score a touchdown late, put the game away. But I like what Dallas is doing, and having Dak back, I think, is certainly going to help that team, throughout the rest of the season.
I agree. And I agree with you. You talk about, what do they always talk about? What wins championships, Coach?
Well, defense wins championships, but as an
Thank you.
offensive guy, I still say the team that scores the most points wins.
Well,
So
regardless of what you say, I believe the philosophical approach the Dallas Cowboys should take
outdated.
is rely on that defense.
Yes.
Yeah. We're on the same page, even though you don't want to admit it. All right, moving on. We talked a little bit about it because we talked about Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. And that's the game from Monday night. I'll tell you what, Coach, that 2021 quarterback class, when it was drafted in SF leagues, was so valued. I mean, it was incredible. People talked about this class as if we were talking about the 1983 class with John Elway and with, Dan Marino and other people. And it just kind of hasn't, for whatever the reason may be, lived up to that way. So with that being said, it was so nice to see the Chicago Bears do some things to make Justin Fields feel comfortable and make him get in a rhythm. And you saw what came of it. They look pretty damn good, Coach. Justin Fields looked like a quarterback I'm finally excited to have on my team.
No, and he's starting to come out. One of the guys at C. Williams NFL, Christian Williams, a very, very good friend of ours, very, very high on Justin Fields coming in the draft. He was his number one quarterback, even with Trevor Lawrence coming in that draft. Felt like that Ohio State with Ryan Day's offense is a pro-style offense. It gets quarterbacks NFL ready. We're seeing that now with C.J. Stroud. But I like with Justin Fields was, I think, QB3 last week, QB8 in week 6. He's QB16 on the season. Starting to get it going with the legs. He's starting to run the ball a little bit more. He's got 364 yards. He's projected for almost 900 yards rushing. That's big for that offense. You're starting to see Darnell Mooney get more involved. Cole Kmet had a couple catches last week. He's still only completing 56% of his passes, has 6 picks on the year with just 5 touchdowns. There's still some developing that needs to happen, but that offensive line certainly not doing him any favors. They got to get the run game going with David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert. But I love what Justin Fields is doing. This is exactly what we felt like he could be. I think last year with Matt Nagy's offense, you just have to kind of throw that out. It was so mismanaged and so poorly done with Andy Dalton that I'm starting to like what the Chicago Bears are doing. And they're in every game, it seems like, every week. So they're playing well. They beat up on Tampa Bay, So I like what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's just nice because you guys spend so much time looking at film, and Justin Fields looked the part, and for him to finally look like the biggest takeaway I got was he felt comfortable. If you watched him in the interview at the end of the game, I felt like he was feeling much better about his personal position on the team and in football itself. So it was nice to see. We go from Justin Fields to probably the biggest punching bag on Twitter because of his usage with 2 guys that have been highly drafted in the offseason, one for the last 2 years and one this year, and that's Arthur Smith with Atlanta. He's down by 21 points late in the game, or not late in the game, in the second half, and he doesn't seem to care whatsoever and continues to run the rock. And he runs the rock without having his best tailback in. He gives his team no opportunity to win. And as a fantasy manager with guys like Drake London and Kyle Pitts, it's just tough to watch week in and week out.
Yeah, what's crazy is somehow the Falcons are 3-4 and tied for the NFC South lead with the Bucs. So as long as that's the case, Arthur Smith will continue to probably do what he's doing. And what's absolutely crazy to me is Kyle Pitts, best tight end prospect ever to come out in the draft, has 68 grabs for over 1,000 yards. The only knock was he didn't see the touchdown upside with Matt Ryan last year. He's got a total of 30 targets, 16 grabs for only 178 yards and a single touchdown. He's tight end 22 at only 6.3 points per game. Now you add in Drake London, okay? First round draft capital. You took Pitts at 4. You took Drake London, I want to say, at 8. I can't remember if that's correct or not, where his spot was. 44 targets on the year, only 26 receptions for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's wide receiver 36 at 10 points per game. That's a lot of draft capital on those two guys to not find ways to manufacture. We talked about that earlier with other offensive coordinators understand how to do that. Arthur Smith has no idea how to scheme guys open, but he's 3-4. The team is competitive. They're tied for first. There's no reason for us to think he changes anything he's doing, and that's with Cordell Patterson out. If they continue to do what they're doing, you're taking yourself out of the running to tank for a C.J. Stroud, which everybody thought Atlanta was going to be doing. You're not given a chance to find out what you have in Desmond Ridder by continuing to play Marcus Mariota. It is an absolute dumpster fire in Atlanta, but the reality is Arthur Smith does know how to run the football. He did it with Tennessee with Derrick Henry. He's doing it right now. And whether it's Tyler Algier, it's Caleb Huntley, it's Cordell Patterson, it's Mike Davis, it's however many running backs he seems like he's used this year. There's nothing Arthur Smith could care less about our fantasy teams. He could care less about what people think about his play calling. As long as that team is competing for a division title, there's no reason for him to change what he's doing from a fantasy perspective. It sucks. How do you take a guy you coached last year at 68 grabs for 1,000 yards? It's only got 30 targets this season. Help me understand like I'm 5.
I can't. But more importantly, I'll tell you what, we got to keep going back to real football versus fantasy football. And he said that all I'm trying to do is win games 4 weeks ago when people were criticizing for his usage with Kyle Pitts. And I get it. You and I have both been in the coaching industry. I was, in a tough situation, and the word fired could have happened. Or my point is, I get where he's coming from, but at the same time, it's always, to me, it's a developmental thing, and you're not doing anything to develop anybody by trying to win games at whatever the cost may be, when you're not able to truly compete. Whether they win the NFC South or not, with Tampa Bay struggling, with New Orleans struggling, it doesn't matter. You're not going to compete for an NFL championship. So start the process now, commit to the process, and give yourself a chance to win down the line and find what you have with all the people that you do have. Because you've invested a lot in Drake London. You've invested a lot in Kyle Pitts, and you spent draft picks now. It's not like it was when you and I were in high school and they had 12 rounds. Now they have like 6 or 7. So if you invest a high draft pick in a guy like Desmond Ridder in the 3rd round, see what you got. Stop the charade or whatever you want to call it, masquerade, and just figure it out and leave the freaking wins to another team that actually got an opportunity to win the NFL title.
No, it's absolutely ridiculous. I can't make sense of it. And look, I get it. And if the guy's trying to fight to save his job, he wants to be the head coach. Again, you're not doing the organization any favors. You're tripping over $1 to get to $1 million because you're basically setting the team back because you have so many holes to fill on the defensive side of the ball. You have holes to fill on the offensive line. You're going to dumb yourself into a mid to late first-round pick instead of what could have been a top 5 pick in the first, in the second, in the third, and you're getting very good players that can immediately make a difference at multiple areas of your team. And you're not developing anybody. He's either the worst developer of talent at the skill position that I've ever seen at the NFL level at the head coaching position. I won't say ever seen because we can name some other coaches, but in his 2-year audition, you can give him credit for Cordell Patterson, and I understand he's hurt. You cannot, and you want to give him credit for Kyle Pitts last year, but now that's gone. Drake London started off the season well, had a great preseason, was worth all the hype. That's gone backwards. It just doesn't. There's nothing about Arthur Smith outside of his ability to run the football that makes any sense whatsoever. Down 21, and you're running the football, eating up clock, and not using the playmakers that you have. We can go on and on about how
We can't,
dysfunctional.
Arthur Smith. I'll tell you what. If you're watching the show, there's a strong chance you're on Twitter. And if you're on Twitter, all you ever hear is anybody beating up on Arthur Smith, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
But I do believe there's a correlation in the both, though. I do believe that to improve your team overall, your organization, a pseudo tank while playing a guy like Desmond Ritter isn't a bad thing. But
No.
I guess that's why we have a podcast and we're not coaching the NFL, Coach.
There you go.
Well, Coach, that's it. We went through every bullet point. Anything else we should talk about?
No, you want to try to help Mo Diesel out and gets real quick, or you want to wait and do
Okay,
that?
so let's talk about it. Mo Diesel, here's the thing I need to know. First and foremost, am I winning this year? You would know more than I would. What is your current record? Please put that in the comments. And secondly, looking at this, it looks like a one quarterback standard scoring league. And if that is my team in a one quarterback standard scoring league, I'm feeling real comfortable. The only weakness, and it's not a weakness, but David Carr, your quarterback, is not as strong as your running back situation right now with Chubb, with Walker, and your wide receivers with Evans and AJ Brown. Yeah, ETN too. I love your team. I do. So what is your record? Is this redraft? Is it dynasty? Is it what is the concept we're dealing with?
I'm going to assume one quarterback redraft, but
just like okay, so it's a pretty good
he
team.
Certainly has. Yeah, he certainly has a great roster. I think, Derek Carr's a guy you got probably some pretty good value. I mean, he was going mid rounds basically in one quarterback leagues. I think you have a good situation there. Chubb and Walker. Chubb's having a phenomenal season. There's talk about Kareem Hunt maybe getting traded before the trade deadline. If that happens, it wheels up for Nick Chubb. He's already taken over that RB1 role. He's getting more volume than he's seen over the last couple of years in terms of timeshare split. You have Kenneth Walker, who's rising. You have ETN, who's rising. You have Rachaad White, who I love. If anything happens to Fournette, I think you're going to see Rachaad White take off. Bateman, Sutton. Obviously, I don't love Allen Robinson. I think there's much better options out there for you, depending on who's on the waiver wire. But your team absolutely has got a chance to win it all. I think you've got to have some things go right. You got to stay healthy. But I like the roster construction for sure.
I do too. If there's any way that you can trade I don't know. I hate to trade. I hate to trade one of those running backs, but if I can get a better tight end than Goddard, and not that he's a terrible tight end, but you yourself earlier this show and on a previous podcast said,
I was going to get to that.
If you're not the first option at the tight end, what do you think Goddard is he the third option? Is he after Smith? Is he before Smith? What are your thoughts on Goddard?
Yeah, you're right there with me. If you have Devontae Smith and AJ Brown's your clear first option in that offense. I think your second option is Devontae Smith, depending on who you're playing and game script. But Dallas Goedert is a guy that I like as tight end. I think he's actually outperformed what I thought he would do this year, just because I think Jalen Hurts is really elevated in the passing game and made a huge jump from last year to this year. But I think you're right. If you can find somebody to give for Goddard, I don't really want to trade away those running backs either, because running backs are the most often injured position. We've seen it again this year. You had 73 games missed last year between RB1s, and that's continued to happen this year. So I don't really want to look at getting rid of any of those guys. And you don't have a lot of trade in the wide receiver room, because you don't want to get rid of A.J. Brown. You don't want to get rid of Mike Evans. I think if you're going to try to do something there, look at Bateman and Sutton and see if you can get another tight end for sure. But again, it depends on the people in your league and how much you like to trade.
I think I feel comfortable. If this was my one quarterback league and that was my roster, I'm going to ride it out. I'm not making any deals.
I have no problem with it. Yeah, I actually like the roster.
Yeah, it's a great roster. So I would love Mick Diesel or Muck Diesel, Mo Diesel, whatever it is. I would love to know if it's redraft or dynasty.
Yeah. We're going to assume redraft. You want to get to Gets real quick and the last one before we go?
Yeah, let's go ahead. Absolutely.
He's been patiently waiting.
Yeah, no problem. What do we got here? Read it to me, Coach.
So we have Dak, Saquon. This is a redraft 0.7. What I read 0.75 PPR 12-man league. He's got Dak, Saquon Barkley, Kenneth Walker, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Chris Godwin, Dalton Schultz, Jacoby Myers, and on his bench, he's got Bateman, Drake London. We just talked about London. He's got Jahan Dotson, who's been struggling with injury. Don't love the quarterback situation there right now. Don't know if they can support 2 pass catchers. He's got Matt Collins, J.D. McKissick, I'm assuming Rashad White, and Cade Otton. What are your thoughts there?
So first thing I'm thinking about, again, it's always the same thing because there's only like 3 huge tight ends in fantasy football. If I can upgrade from Schultz, I'm making a move. If I can't, we're going back to what we talked about before. I like Dak. I love Saquon. I love Kenneth Walker. I love Cup and Diggs and Godwin. So if you can upgrade the tight end, make a move. If you can't, stay pat and see what happens.
Yeah, I think his roster, I mean, just in those top 5 guys you listed between Dak, Saquon, Kenneth Walker, Cup, Diggs, I'll even throw in Godwin there because I think he's going to start rising as he gets more than 100%. I love his roster. I think Schultz, if Dallas does get back to a more pass-heavy scheme, I think Schultz is a guy that he doesn't give you a lot of yak yards, doesn't give you a lot of average depth of target, doesn't give you a lot of but yards per reception, but he's reliable. He's going to get consistent targets. He's a red zone option. So he's not terrible, but he's not, again, if you don't have one of those top 2 tight ends, there's a big drop-off after that. But I still like Schultz. You're not going to pick anybody up on the waiver wire. You could look to get, again, Rashad Bateman, I think, has some trade value, but you need to wait for him to pop in a game. You have plenty of depth at the wide receiver position. I don't think London or Dotson or Hollins or any of those guys have any trade value. So the only guy you have in your roster I'd be willing to trade would be Rashad Bateman, but I want to wait for him to put together a game or 2. Then you can look to upgrade the tight end position.
Remember, there's only 2 to 3 tight ends that you really should be wanting to get. So that means there's only 2 to 3 wide receiver tight ends in your league or league managers that have those type of players. If you don't have them and you can't make a deal that doesn't make sense, write it out.
Stand fast.
Schultz is as good as anybody else at this point. Coach, I can't thank you enough for kind of leading the way and leading us down this path that we went on tonight. I appreciate you, brother. Everybody else, tune in on Sunday. And again, this is literally goes to the person who said, who should I start? And I said, Romeo Dobbs. If that was you, DM us and we'll get to the jersey. Coach, appreciate you, brother.
Hey, we loved all the chats. Appreciate you guys that tuned in, that asked questions. We absolutely love it. The more active we can be, the better. Tune in Sunday morning, 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're going to give ourselves a little bit more time to help you with your final start and sit questions as the injury reports come out for the early slate. And we want to help you out. Hit the DMs, Brett. I don't know if you want to pop that up there one more time, but
you got it.
hit us on Twitter at Coach Bruce 122. You can find Brett at Brett L. Pape. We do have the name switched up because we had technical difficulties and Brett had to pop out, pop back in. But you can also hit us up at Coach Approach FF. If you have any fantasy questions, start and sit questions, hit the DMs. We'd love to help you win your leagues.
Appreciate you all, Coach. You're the man. Appreciate
Love you, man.
brother. We'll see you Sunday morning.
All right, brother.